We are live. Guys, thank you for jumping on to this week's episode.
Happy to be here. Thank you for having us.
Thanks, James. Looking forward to the conversation.
Not at all, not at all. We'll do some introductions in a minute, but everybody's aware, we have Ashish, who is the co-founder of Andromeda Security, and Ian Forrest, who is the very newly appointed, now please forgive me if I get this wrong, VP of Solutions, Architecture and Sales Engineering.
You got it. It's a mouthful, but
Nailed it. Nailed it. Cool. Glad to get that one out of the way. Guys, to flip to yourselves very, very quickly, you'll do your backgrounds and history a little bit more justice than I ever will. Are you okay to rattle through who you are and what we're doing here?
Yeah, absolutely. Ashish, you want to start?
Sure. James, I'm Ashish, one of the co-founders and head of products for Andromeda. We started Andromeda about 2.5 years ago. My background has been in technology, from data center, networking, cloud infrastructure, and now identity and cloud security. Before this, I was part of another startup called Avi Networks, where we build software-defined load balancers and web application firewall. VMware acquired us back in 2019, and then we started Andromeda in 2023. Over to you, Ian.
Nice.
Great. And I'm Ian. You heard my title. It is a bit of a mouthful, but I'm excited to be here. I've worn a lot of different hats at various different organizations in software engineering, customer experience, solution architecture, product. The majority of my experience has been in using AI, ML, automation to improve efficiency, working very much in the space of SOAR and SIM vendors, different a little bit than the background that Ashish comes with. But in general, my core belief is that context normalization, automation are not nice to haves, are things that are required in trying to solve big problems at scale. I think that's one of the things that excites me about what Andromeda is doing and what they're bringing to the identity space.
Nice. And on that, I think I'd be a fool not to ask, since you are new to the stage here, what caught your eye about these guys? How did this all come to be? What got you excited about what Andromeda are doing?
There's a few things. One of them is I have a long-standing relationship with the VP of sales here at Andromeda, and he made an introduction a while ago to Murli, to Ashish, to Kamal Gaurav, all the co-founders of the company. And one of the things that immediately, as I've been following them for the last year, is the speed at which and the vision is being executed at Andromeda. It's operating at an incredible pace, and I feel the team that they've assembled to be able to deliver this product is top notch. From a team and composition perspective, that part is really exciting. Then the other part is more on what Andromeda is trying to do. Like I said before, big problems require context normalization and automation to be able to solve them. And identity is a big problem. That same thesis that I've been applying in the SOC space over the various various hats and roles that I've had at different organizations is being applied here, using more context in the IT or the IAM space to be able to make faster decisions, to be able to provide more meaningful outcomes, where we go from something that's not grabbing static user role information, but also grabbing and correlating to the activity logs. And that allows organizations to make much more informed decisions when it comes to things like user access, JIT, and any other activities that you might have around IAM governance and access requirements and anything else. Applying that same principle that I've been working on in the SIM and SOAR space and now taking that to IAM is exciting. It follows the core belief that I have on how to make a good operation.
Nice. It sounds like there's huge elements from not the product and the technology itself, but also the team behind this and what they're doing and the growth we've seen. And like yourself, I've been from the outside in following the journey. You guys won the Lightspeed. Well, I saw doing some cool things. And in fact, it just dawned on me, we've touched on it a little bit here, and maybe Ashish, this is one for yourself, but in a nutshell, what is Andromeda Security? What are we doing here? We're on mute, I think, Ashish.
Sorry.
That's good.
And then solution. We like to call ourselves context-driven, intelligent identity security platform. And each of the words is carefully chosen. And let me explain why. The first question, do we exist? What problems we solve? We solve 3 problems. One is security. You probably all aware is the primary attack vector today. We all think that 80% of all breaches involve identity. And we all used to think that, well, if you have strong passwords or MFA or even maybe passwordless, we're all covered. Not quite. About 2/3 of the attacks involve legitimate credentials, whether it's social engineering, insider threats, lost credentials, and so on. We all have to, as an industry, go with an assume breach mindset, which it's not if, it's when you'll get compromised. Now, what an enterprise can control is the attack surface. And unfortunately, over 95 to 99% of all identities are overly privileged, whether it's human identities, non-human identities, and agentic AI. Even if a single identity is breached, you can have a very large attack surface. One of our first goals is we eliminate or at least mitigate the blast radius of a breach. That's the first problem we solve. The second problem, and it's actually a related one, is operational complexity. Today, almost all IAM operations are manual, whether it's joiner, mover, leaver, and so onboarding, offboarding workflows, to assigning roles and entitlements, to defining who should have access to what, and understanding who has access to what. And the reason is there is an explosion in number of identities, human, but also non-human and agentic AI on the one hand. And on the other hand, you have an average enterprise has over 100,000 granular permissions, from on-premises to cloud to SaaS. So it's humanly impossible to use the legacy RBAC to define the right size roles. You need automation, you need intelligent automation. That's the second problem we solve. And the third one, the root cause, is we have so many siloed tools in identity. You have the IGAs, the PAMs, the ITDR, ISPMs, NHIs, agentic AI-only solution. They all work in silos. Whereas all of these identities are intertwined. Their risks, their life cycles intertwined. Not just it's complex operationally, more importantly, there is lack of context. There's a lot of data available, but nobody's built the context to be able to automate everything and to be able to reduce the attack surface. And that's where Andromeda comes in. So our core thesis is that identity is a data problem. It's a lack of context problem, as Ian said earlier. We started, what Andromeda is built an architecture where the core of the architecture is a centralized graph-based data lake, where we ingest a ton of data from all the identity sources, IDPs, cloud, your HR systems, your applications, your ITSM tools. It's not the configurations and entitlements data, it's the activity logs. That's the missing link. Because without the activities, you can't build behavioral models. And now we have all the data for all identities. We build context running AI/ML models around risk quantifications, baselining behavior, anomaly detection, and so on, that you can automate and answer the questions around who are my high-risk identities to, how do I derive least privilege to, how do I do automated JIT based on context, how do I do automated governance and UARs and lifecycle joiner, mover, leaver. So that's, in a nutshell, is Andromeda.
Understood. And it seems to play into a lot of the themes we're seeing in the market at the moment. In fact, you guys are probably best to speak on this, but what are we seeing from an identity market state of play? We mentioned a few terms there: non-human identity, AI, over permissioning. We seem to have, speaking to CISOs in the space, there's a lot of theme around, we've got all this visibility now, which is great, but if we've got the visibility, we need to be able to do something with it. And that's the bridge that we seem to be trying to cross.
Let me take a first stab, and I'm sure Ian has his thoughts as well. We are seeing a few things. Identity is one of the top 2 or 3 key focus areas for CISOs. And but what they're seeing is challenges they're seeing are twofold. One, a lot of identity tools are working in silos, and it's hard to operationalize and build context, as I said earlier. And second, many identity tools either are pure workflow engines or give you visibility but not remediation. Nothing is tying them together. You mentioned NHIs was a cool buzzword a couple of years ago. Suddenly, all the NHI vendors have become agentic AI vendors. Not quite. Human identities, non-human identities, and agentic AI, which, by the way, we can have a conversation. It's a third type of identity, hybrid form of the two. They're all intertwined. You can't have a siloed solution. That's what I think the CISOs don't like, which is, again, another siloed tool for agentic AI. They want automated remediations. They want context. Ian, I'm sure you have thoughts on that as well. Why don't you share what you think about that?
You nailed it. When I look at the way that identity is situated and fragmented today, it seems it's exactly where the SOC space was about 10 years ago. There's this notion of exactly what you said, of being able to correlate and not operate in silos. You have a lot of different tools that are doing very specific things, but not bringing all that context together, and it becomes difficult to make informed decisions. That's exactly the things that you're talking about: graph-based correlation, enriching with context from activities. This is exactly what you see with the XDR, the SOAR, the SIEM space. That's what those tools were built to do. And even those products are consolidating into platform plays, right? They're not existing in siloed spaces anymore. That's one platform that does all of those different things. And that's exactly the parallel between what we're doing here at Andromeda and what the industry is doing in the SIEM and SOAR space for the last 10 years. It's uncanny, the parallel between the two.
Noted. And so it leads into a question I was going to ask you around, at the moment, there seems to be so many new vendors in not identity, but in spaces across the board. And when we speak to CISOs, there's often a conversation along the lines of, like, there's so much out there, there's so much noise. Where do I realistically need to be focusing on? I don't know if you guys have seen a similar thing.
This is a fun conversation for me to have. I feel this is one that I've had for many years. It's going to sound self-serving because of what we do. But identity is definitely the space that people should be focused on, that CISO should be thinking about. Identity powers Auth-N, it powers Auth-Z. It's the front door to your business. Ashish mentioned a lot of different statistics. 80% of breaches are identity related. 93% of enterprises have an identity related incident. 62% of the attacks occur with legit credentials. That's somebody that it looks at somebody that should have access. And 95% of identities are overprivileged. You can work on a lot of other things. You can implement a lot of other controls. You can use the hot new, security tool out there. But if you don't have a handle on identity, as identity has now, you've heard this probably for a decade now, identity has become the perimeter for an organization. If you don't get a handle on your identity, it's tantamount to leaving the doors and the windows and everything unlocked. You might have the best alarm system in the world, but it doesn't matter if somebody can come in and walk right in. And similarly, if you are able to lock down your identities, you reduce risk and you reduce the risk of breach probably more dramatically than any other single thing that you can do within an organization. Again, that's a very biased opinion, but so to be a little less biased, I'd say the other thing that CISO should be focused on, or that security organizations should be focused on in general, is tools that focus on prevention. I think that's a little bit of a shift in the market than where we've been previously. But investing in tools that help you batten down the hatches and stop activity at the point of attack is more critical now than it's ever been. We've been saying for a long time that the speed and the velocity of attack is increasing at a rapid rate, but now we have AI, and AI is allowing for, it's not necessarily that you're going to have AI-based malware come into your environment. That could happen for sure. But AI is allowing for experimentation. It's allowing for dwell time to be reduced significantly, and it's accelerating the rate at which novel attacks can be created at unprecedented levels. And while detection and response is still important for containment, the reality is that the detection and response tools are becoming more forensic tools. You've been breached. There's not a whole lot you can do to contain it because it's going to happen so fast. So tools that help improve your posture and prevent attacks are the most important, and they're more applicable than they've ever been. And specifically, identity, again, with identity being the keys to the kingdom in any organization, is probably the most important thing to focus on.
Some of those numbers and stats you threw out there are baffling in a way. And my question would be, when you are having those conversations, and Ashish, that maybe this is for yourself as well, yeah, is it a case of CISOs know that identity needs to be right up there in terms of what we need to be focusing on, or are these stats a bit more of a, well, actually, I wasn't sure it was that much of an issue. I didn't know that 95% of permissions are over permissioned, for example.
No, CISOs definitely know about this. The biggest challenge is identity is such a complex set of identity has a complex set of challenges that sometimes they don't know where to start, and that's where Andromeda actually provides a great help, because it's a unified solution. What we do when we engage with customers is we start with discovery and understand what the biggest challenges are, and we actually create a customer journey map, if you will, of, okay, what have we identified as the top level of identity problems or challenges in the organization, and what is the way in which over the next few months you can take from in a prioritized order and start addressing them. The biggest issue is that sometimes the CISOs may get overwhelmed and say, I know I have a lot of problems, where do I start? And that's where we as an industry need to think of this as a journey and take incremental approach, a phased approach to, let's say, take care of stale accounts or dormant accounts, or then start reducing the unused privileges or unused roles, or then moving to over time just-in-time access and so on. It's definitely top of mind, and we as an Andromeda, we have helped a lot of these CISOs and customers in taking a phased approach to improving their identity security. And the other thing that sometimes, or many times, the CISOs are concerned with is, if I put a security gate, it's going to impact my agility. It's going to slow down my business. And always, security leaders are making a decision, a balanced decision between how much security is too much versus too little, and how does it impact the business. And that's where I think, as Ian also mentioned, AI and context is your friend. because we are at a stage where, and what Andromeda is doing with our customers is using behavioral models, understanding an expected behavior pattern. You can eliminate friction when, let's say, when somebody's requesting a privilege access and there is no risk, it's expected behavior. Why ask somebody to rubber stamp it and slow down your users when things are good? Go for the speed, go for automated AI-based approvals when there is no risk. At the same time, because again, we're looking for anomalies and out of the ordinary behavior, when there is risk, when there is anomalies, you ask the appropriate approvers, but give them the context. So they don't have to waste time in figuring it out whether this is legitimate or a false positive signal. That's where we are helping the CISOs also adopt some of these things such as just-in-time access. One of the things you should say is we all know zero trust is great. We all know we want to go to just-in-time access and reduce standing privilege. Why hasn't it been adopted yet? Because it adds business friction. And we are doing our part at Andromeda to increase the adoption of JIT through these context and AI-powered automation.
Understood. Is there a slight level of skepticism from CISOs to begin with when you come to the table with something this that genuinely does join all the dots together, and you've got obviously use cases behind that to showcase it, but immediately my gut says there might be a case of not sure. You say business slowdown, risk. I've got some trusted partners here that maybe aren't perfect, but they're doing a job for me to a point.
I think things have evolved quite fast there, James. Everybody takes a phased approach. Nobody's going to say, I'm going to put everything under one day one.
Yeah.
They do a phased approach. They take on, we have different AI models. They say, I want to start with the simpler use cases, build the confidence, and then go from there. I think most CISOs, you and me in our personal life, in our professional life, the use of AI has increased, the trust has increased. Many of the CISOs are looking for solutions where AI can help them reduce the friction. In fact, this week, in the last 4 days, I've had 3 conversations with 3 different customers where we showed our um, um, context-based, efficient, and automated user access reviews, which are pain today. This is wow, that's a game changer because my employees hate me when I do user access reviews. But with what Andromeda is doing with the context-based UARs, that's going to really help me achieve my compliance goals and not upset my customer and my employees. So that's the true how do I say validation we are getting from our customers.
Not throwing in the spanner in the works with a team. That's a win in my book. I don't know. I don't know how you advertise that, but I think that's one to put forward straight away. And we've touched on it a few times on this call already, but agentic AI, it's obviously the buzzword of today and the moment, and there's a lot of conversation around it and where it's going to be in our industry, how long it's going to be here for, and how to approach it. But from you guys' perspective, when you're talking to security leaders or even technology leaders as a whole, what are you advising on the approach to agentic AI to be?
I think, I can't be afraid. It came from a product role where we're building agentic AI to really help improve the investigation of SIM-based alerts. And the results are staggering. We can't ignore the fact that agentic AI has the reality where we can significantly improve the efficiency of humans and an organization. One thing, we can't be afraid. We need to ensure that we're taking advantage of these technologies. I think the interesting thing about agentic AI agentic AI, how they behave in comparison to NHIs and humans, have a very predictable path. We know exactly what they're going to do, what positions they're going to use, exactly what, how they'll behave. Agentic AI is very different. It behaves like your most overachieving, over-permissioned possible human user. And what I mean by that is with the human user, we already talked about, there are many people that are over-permissioned, many identities that are over-permissioned. And that largely has to do with not understanding what you actually need to give somebody to be able to do their job. Andromeda helps a lot with understanding that. But those permissions largely go unused. They represent risk because there's potential. With agentic AI, you have a dynamic AI agent, and its purpose is to try to do what you told it to go do, and it's going to use every permission that it has in order to be able to achieve that objective. It doesn't mean that the AI agent is inherently malicious. It means that it's going to use every resource that it has at its disposal. And the difference is you go from potential risk with a human user that's over permission to an AI agent. It's not longer a potential risk, it's realized risk. The solution isn't to ban AI agents, but it's to make sure that they're governed in a way that you would govern a human, and that you understand, you have a good program and process in place to be able to understand specifically what is needed in order for that AI agent or for that human to do their jobs. And that's exactly the type of scenario where you need activity correlation to be able to understand these are how this activity correlates to these permissions and these roles, and then you can make sure that you right size and continuously monitor those identities to make sure they're continuously that right size, not right sized on creation.
Got you. And is there maybe a hypothetical example we could draw upon of your human identity versus the agentic AI identity going wrong?
Do you want
I can take that. Let's give you the two kinds of agentic AI identities in general, James. One is somebody who works on behalf of you and that's going to use a subset of your entitlements, permissions. And that is something that's more autonomous, it's its own credentials, and both require different guardrails. But talk about the first one, for example. James, you have a few agents that you have created to do some tasks on your behalf. Now, you may be unaware of certain entitlements you have because as part of the organizations you have moved, you have accumulated permissions that you are not aware of, and you don't care, you don't use it on a daily basis. You've created an agent and you said, I want you to do this research for me for whatever your job. And you give your entitlements and say, find out the best answer. It is going to exploit all the possible access, as Ian says, it's going to have. Now, imagine you move from one part of the organization to a different part of the organization where you shouldn't have access to the old data, but you still do. Your agents are going to exploit that and potentially be in a violation of compliance bill, SOD violation, because the second group you've joined where your permissions are in conflict with the first one you had. You didn't know, you didn't care, nothing was done. It was potential risk, Ian said. But now the agent's going to realize that risk, where it's going to get that conflicting or the information that it should not have and produce a result. And now not only have violated potential regulations, but also it could have data that you accidentally leak because as part of the answers, part of the research, and that can put your organization at risk. That's an example of how on behalf of agents can inadvertently go rogue and create risk and compliance issues.
Wow. Industries that spring to mind here, banking and finance, insider trading stuff, pharmaceutical research, all these things where you need to keep it segregated, keep it locked down.
Yeah, spot on. And other even that's a great example. It could also be even in a development organization, technology organization. You have access to GitHub, you have access to source code, you have access to other things, and suddenly your agent got you got overly excited and took a snippet of the code, used it as an example in a public blog that you published because you wanted to publish something about your work. And there you go. You've also exposed your internal IP potentially. There
Wow.
are different risks that have different potential risks, but yes, you're spot on there.
Cracking, there's layers to this. Sorry.
It reminds me talking to somebody very vague about the use case here, the interaction with your end users, right? Your AI, say you have a company that books vacations, right? And they give an AI agent for you to be able to interact with that company. If the AI agent, for example, has the ability to set prices to whatever they want, a human would not go overboard. They would not say, I'm going to put this at $1 or $2. But I know of a very specific case where, a customer said, I have a bereavement and I need to get on a flight immediately. The flights are too expensive. Is there any way that I can get a less expensive flight? Sure enough, the AI, sure, we have bereavement pricing and here you can get it for really cheap. And it turns out that wasn't possible, but it had the permissions to be able to do that. Then it exploited them to give somebody, a flight that they were supposed to. And then, a little bit later, to go retrieve more funds and say that this isn't available. And it created a very negative customer experience and not achieve the outcome that they were looking for. Those are the type of risks that you run into in a very real world example of, where an over permissioned agent resulted in something that a human would never do. It had the capability to do it, it did.
Wow, that is a truly real world end user experience that wasn't positive. I guess it happens so fast as well. It's nothing that we can't sit here and regulate what it's doing, can't watch it all day. It's going to happen very quickly. So these things will be hard to catch. Ashish, you mentioned earlier around non-human identities, human identities, and there's a middle ground in the middle. There's a hybrid of the two.
Yeah, agentic AI we think of as a hybrid. I think Ian touched upon that as well. So, yeah, the reason is human identities, you and me talk to multiple applications, but we have one credentials. We use single sign-on to talk to multiple applications, and we have what ad hoc. We do what we need to do. NHIs, standard NHIs, if there is a word, that service accounts and bots and so on, they're more predictable. They're doing the repetitive thing. They're talking to one application with one credential, right? So their behavior is very predictable. As we discussed, agentic AI, technically an NHI or acts like an NHI, but it talks to multiple applications with separate credentials for each of the applications. That's one difference from an NHI. But second is it behaves like a human. Somebody said it's a human on steroid in some sense, because as we discussed, it's not only ad hoc and unpredictable, but it's going to, because of its automated inference capabilities, going to exploit everything you have. So you cannot be, say, agentic AI is an NHI. You're missing the point by not looking at the behavioral models that you have to for human users. So that's why I said it's a hybrid form, some characteristics of a human, some characteristics of an NHI, and you have to model them as a third type of identity. And they're all intertwined. There'll be ownership. Human owns NHIs, human owns agentic AIs. The agentic AI might talk to one or more humans. The risks, the life cycles, they're all intertwined. So you have to address all three holistically if you're solving an identity security problem in an enterprise.
And that's why right-sizing roles for agentic AI is so important. Even more than right-sizing roles for NHIs is very important as well, because if somebody gets a hand on those credentials, they can exploit them and get to other things that they shouldn't be able to. But the difference is, if you have an NHI, a service account, as an example, and it starts behaving in a way that's very different than it has, it's pretty easy to detect that. Not every organization has the ability to, but if all of a sudden I have an NHI or a service account that's been hitting this API, asking this question with different parameters every day for the last year, and it starts now asking different questions that it's never asked before, that's a very easy thing to build a detection for. With the agentic AI, like, it's going to behave more like a human. It's much harder to understand what it should or shouldn't be doing. And right sizing the roles is much more important, because it will do things that you didn't expect by nature of how these agentic AIs work.
Wow. This is layers more complex than I'd initially maybe given it credit to. And we've seen the rise of identity security over the last certainly 6-12 months or so. It's getting more attention. And then this really speaks volumes to why some of the stats earlier in this call were pretty wild, if I'm honest. And I know we've darted around. Thank you for letting me pick your brain on this space. I guess looking ahead to the next 6-12 months or so, what are we both looking forward to?
Sure. Go ahead, Ian. Why don't you start first?
I think for me, I think because my lens for this is going to be probably shorter term, because I haven't been at Andromeda for as long. I think it will end with Ashish providing probably a more visionary statement. But for me, I think the thing that I'm most excited for is being part of an organization and bringing to market something that treats identity as true security problem. I think 2026 is going to be a year where identity kind of gets the endpoint treatment, where we're continuously validating and right sizing with context and correlation. And that to me is exciting. It solves one of the biggest problems that we have in security and represents a very bright future. I'm very excited about that. And then Ashish, I'll let you end with our more probably visionary statement.
Yeah, I think, thanks, Ian. Our vision at Andromeda has been that we want to be the unified solution that's context driven, that's intelligent across all identities, human, non-human, agentic AI, across all use cases, from visibility and insights to right sizing privileges to just in time access to governance, UARs, and onboarding, offboarding workflows, having siloed tools replaced. And third, across all environments, whether it's cloud infrastructure, SaaS applications, or on premises. On the product side, we'll be executing on that vision, working with our customers. We're going to be expanding our customer reach as we expand new set of customers and so on. That's where what we are focused on. And frankly, partner with our customers, because some of the new challenges are new, such as agentic AI. We are working with a few design partners on the agentic AI side to really understand their real world challenges, how they're operationalizing agentic AI, and build along with them the right set of solutions that'll help them as we move forward. That's what I'm looking forward to over the next 6 to 12 months.
That's awesome. It sounds like identity is going to be front and center, and you guys are right in the middle of that with a lot more growth to come, I should say.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, Ian, Ashish, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it and excited to get this one out.
Yeah, likewise.
Thank you, James. Yeah, it was a fun conversation.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.